It's my pleasure to introduce again David Pletner Saunders and Martin Cohen with the Cultural Planning Group. These colleagues and friends have really taken a look at our community so that they could better understand the construct of how we work. We decided when we were engaging a firm that we did not need a firm that wanted to come and talk to us about every other city. We only wanted them to talk to us about Wichita Falls. The plan was a blueprint and a guide and a jumpstart for creating a stronger cultural system for Wichita Falls. It had several key deliverables and was backed by a lot of public conversation. And so I appreciate the time that Martin and David spent looking at all those conversations from the past to understand how we were grounded and to guide us through an assessment. And we thought it would be important for them to come back to you in this format and share out their learning. So I'm going to turn it over to the team, cultural planning team, and let them take the floor.
Great. Thank you, Margie. So this is Martin. We of course met many of you many months ago when we were all actually in the same room together, when we were all had a chance to be with other people in the same room together. It's probably hard to remember those times, but I think that was back in February was when we were in Wichita Falls. What David and I'd like to do is just go through with you what the process was, a little bit of what we were trying to, how we were approaching it, what we were looking at, and the themes that we put in the report on what we call the findings. What did we hear? What did you all tell us? And how are we reflecting those back? So we titled this, and we'll explain this more as we go through. We titled the report "Plateau or Platform," and that's really, in essence, that really talks in some ways about all the things that we saw that have changed in Wichita Falls over the past several years since the cultural plan was adopted in 2012 when it was put together. And again, we'll unpack that a little bit more, but that's what we titled it. The purpose of the review was really to look at the goals and priorities that were established in 2012 in the cultural plan, to understand how much they really provided guidance. I should have prefaced all of this by saying that we were commissioned ultimately by the Pretty Foundation, since the Pretty Foundation had been the primary convener of the cultural planning process back in 2011 and 12, and they were the driving force behind, along with obviously many community members and other foundations, in putting the cultural plan into place. One of the things that was interesting to us as David and I were in Wichita Falls was the, I don't want to say the effort, but the time it took to distinguish between this assessment being about the cultural plan versus being about the Arts Alliance. Throughout the process, we really found that there was a convergence of those. In some cases, a lot of people weren't even aware of the cultural plan, of course, but they were aware of the alliance that was part of an outcome of the cultural plan. And you see there, without reading them to you, you can see the questions that were really driving and shaping and framing the work that we did in the assessment process. I should just say, and by the way, just feel free to chime in if you have any questions as I'm going along. We want to make this iterative, and we'll have plenty of time afterwards for conversation and discussion and your thoughts. But if anything comes up, just raise your hand or speak up. Thank you. Just a quick thing on our methodology. As you see here, we talked to a lot of people. We focused on many of you who are leaders in the arts organizations. We talked to a lot of the individual artists, but we also spread throughout the community, understanding whether it was people involved in philanthropy, elected officials. We had a chance to speak with the mayor of Wichita Falls, and other kinds of leaders and community leadership. So it really gave us a broad spectrum of points of view of the cultural plan itself, of views of arts and culture and creativity, of what's happening in the community. We talked to both, I should say, both people in the for-profit creative industries as well as people in the nonprofit creative industries. So it was pretty broad-based. And we did that over 2 visits, and I think we got a lot of good feedback. One of the things that I think David and I can share with you that was, as people coming in to do assessment work, that really gave us confidence in some of the things we're going to share with you in a couple minutes, is how consistently we heard the same kind of feedback across all of these different individuals and these kinds of groups of people. So whether it was artists or whether it was general community members, whether it was the city leaders, you know, we heard very consistent messages, and that's a good sign in any kind of evaluative process of getting, you know, there weren't outliers. There was a block of messages that we heard regularly. So, and here's a list of some of the outcomes. This is different than the themes. I mean, these were, we think we distinguish outcomes and impacts as results of the cultural plan. What kind of change or what kind of difference did the cultural plan make? Consistently heard from all of you, particularly in the creative and community and the heritage communities, you know, about how much more cohesive and collaborative the community has become. You're all on this morning with us on this Zoom, but we saw that in the community meetings we did, in the artist meetings we did. We heard this really loud and clear that a transition has been made, and there's a sense of working together. Again, one of the themes we'll talk about is the broader, more inclusive definition of arts and culture, you know, in Wichita Falls. Instead of reading all these, I'll let you read them. But I think that the overall outcome that we saw is that the cultural plan has made a difference in arts, culture, and heritage in Wichita Falls, and as well as surrounding areas. You know, that it's actually, as outsiders who do a lot of cultural planning and then look over a period of time of what happens in a community, for a community the size of Wichita Falls, for a city of 100,000 or so people, it's actually pretty extraordinary what's happened in 8 years. And I think you all should be very proud of yourselves and your role in making that happen. So the themes that we heard, what we call the findings, and this is consistent with change in Wichita Falls. You know, the most common word that we heard was Wichita Falls is a much more vibrant place than it used to be. A lot of people cited, you know, the art walk. People just cited a sense of more presence of artists, you know, particularly in downtown as well as throughout and across the city in many ways. The fact that artists are no longer underground, but they're becoming a much more integrated and vital part of the life of the community. And just this overall sense that Wichita Falls has an energy, and a lot of that is a new energy, and a lot of that is emanating, you know, through the work of the cultural sector, the for-profit and the nonprofit cultural sector. 9th Street Studios were talked about, you know, and just those are just examples. We'll talk about some of the other things in other parts of, you know, I don't want to just focus on downtown, but around vibrancy, you know, that's the most common theme that we heard. Here's a picture of all of you last month playing your kazoos. You know, as I mentioned earlier in the outcomes, one of the things that we heard about was really what we're calling the connectedness, the cooperation, and a shared sense of community. That the arts community, that the cultural community has really banded together and is thinking much more collaboratively, that it's thinking much more about as a unit of its own advocacy about how to further the work of the community, that there's sharing of ideas. There's less of a sense of competition and territory, and much more a sense of, you know, how do we build the cultural sector versus just, you know, thinking about the individual organizations. I think the quote that's here, really, the Alliance and the Cultural Plan have forced the community to come out of their silos and work together. That's a quote from one of the participants and from all of you, and I think that really sums it all up. I suspect the fact that you're all here again today is another good example of that. This issue of a broader definition of arts and culture, you know, that there is the diversity of Wichita Falls is being embraced in terms of thinking about arts and culture, that there's more participants from across communities, from across, whether it's the Latinx communities, whether it's the African American communities. Audiences were beginning to diversify in ways that they hadn't. Programming was beginning to diversify. And there's a recognition of the cultures that exist and have, of course, for a very long time in Wichita Falls that weren't usually included in the definition of arts and culture. And, you know, I think that diversity, what somebody talks here says, you know, this has given Wichita Falls more diversity and character and make us less polarized. That's a really strong quote. That's a really strong statement. And I think that goes along the lines of what I was talking about being, you know, an extraordinary impact coming out of the cultural plan. So David, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about these next few things.
Thanks, Marty. So I just want to, before I move on to this slide, I just wanted to reinforce something Martin mentioned a couple slides ago about cooperation and collaboration. You know, we, as he said, we do cultural planning for communities around the nation, and I've had a chance to kind of, like we did with Wichita Falls, you know, fly in and talk to a lot of people about your own community. And the cooperation, sense of cohesion, new sense of connectedness, those are, in my opinion, those are very precious and maybe even rare commodities in an arts community. We too often go to a place and we find, you know, bitter divisions, competition, organizations that won't even talk to each other, much less collaborate. So I just wanted to comment that what you have generated together in Wichita Falls is special and will enable many future, you know, benefits and blessings for your community. I don't want to paper over any differences. You still have to compete for dollars. You may not all like each other all the time, but the tenor of your community is really noticeable. So I hope you will continue to embrace that. That was, you know, one of the loudest themes we heard from you in December and February. So turning our attention to this slide, first of all, we love this photo. This gets the cuteness award for all the many photos in the Alliance photo bank that Ann shared with us. But the subject of the slide is the role of the Alliance. And the Alliance is seen as the driver of positive change, and it's acknowledged by the community, arts community and community at large, as the leadership body in implementing the cultural plan. So where some may not always focus on the cultural plan per se, they willingly followed the lead of the Alliance. The approach that the Alliance has taken to leadership is crucial here. It includes producing programs, but it also encouraging others to lead and stepping back to enable them to act. So the significance is that it has strengthened the capacity of your whole community to be effective and self-reliant. In line with this, the Alliance has been producing professional development, which has helped organizations and people over the past 4 or 5 years, especially emerging arts leaders, to master new challenges. Examples are the Regional Museum Network, this Arts Leaders Forum, the town halls, and the Lincoln Center Institute. So while this has led to a collective building of capacity in Wichita Falls, the arts community still faces challenges. You told us about them, even before the COVID pandemic, and there is clearly more work to be done in supporting your organizations. All right, let me get to the next slide then. Sorry, I'm juggling 2 windows on my, my little laptop screen here. So the Alliance has earned a vote of confidence from the city of Wichita Falls. Foremost, of course, is the transfer of the Arts Grants Program to the Alliance. And over the past few years, the city has increased the allocation of hotel occupancy tax funds from $79,000 in 2016 to $90,000 in 2019. We understand it's lower this year because of the pandemic and the reduction in hotel stays. The city plays other functions in the arts, although these are not always recognized by the public. The city operates the municipal auditorium, of course. It's the most visible thing it does, and it's the community's largest performing arts venue. It also maintains an online directory of museums, galleries, and historic sites on its website. I don't think it's as comprehensive as what's on the Alliance's website now, but it is there and serves a different visitorship. And as it says on this slide, there's a shared desire to see the city expand its role in funding and leadership in the arts. Stakeholders, you, believe that arts and culture contribute to downtown revitalization and to Wichita Falls' overall cultural vitality, and that implies a role for the city. The city now recognizes that the arts help attract and retain talent, an economic driver, and promote social cohesion and youth development. They mentioned this in our meeting with the mayor and city manager. These are all worthy civic goals. They acknowledge that. There seems to be an opening now. I mean, maybe it's been delayed by the pandemic, but an opening for city leadership to reconsider the role of the arts in economic development in particular. And this may be even more relevant as Wichita Falls begins to re-emerge from the recession, hopefully next year. So what did you tell us you want the city to do? Potential future roles include increased funding, partnering in cultural facilities projects, and creating a downtown cultural district. There were other ideas, but those came up several times. There are a couple of existing city funding opportunities that are worth knowing about. The city has tax increment funds available for portions of the east side. And there are two other pots of funding, community development block grants, and I love this, 4B sales tax corporation dollars. So without going into all the details about this, if you are looking for specialized city funding for a particular project, these are worth investigating, and they are listed in the actual text of the report. So you can either talk to Anne about it or find it in the document. Last but not least, the city could partner with the Alliance and the philanthropic community on a second cultural plan, one where the city is in an active leadership role. This would probably have the largest lasting impact and be the most appropriate way to engage the city in defining a larger role for itself. Okay, Martin, the next slide, please. The Alliance has succeeded in developing new philanthropic support, both inside and outside Wichita Falls, which of course is a very welcome and necessary change. This includes grants from the National Endowment for the Arts, which are kind of a good housekeeping seal, and they help elevate Wichita Falls among other arts funders. Your organizations have sometimes in the past been reluctant to apply for outside funding, but we heard from you that you're beginning to apply more often to the Texas Commission on the Arts, the National Endowment, and other grant makers. As it says on the slide, private funders in the community now often reference the cultural plan in their funding decisions. So if the proposal relates to the cultural plan implementation in some way, it's seen as a stronger proposal. You told us you're nervous about the generational shift underway among philanthropists in the community. We've heard this in many other communities as well. It is a cause for concern. And while many local donors are generous with the arts, you told us you fear that a newer generation of donors may shift priorities away from local arts organizations. And this is the kind of topic that can be addressed well in a cultural planning process. While not a part of the cultural plan per se, it's interesting to note that the Alliance support from Texoma Gives, the annual day of giving, has increased from 20 donors to 100 annually. All right, the next slide, please, Martin. So how have the cultural plan priorities changed or stayed the same? If you haven't read the cultural plan or haven't reviewed it recently, which is probably most or all of you, it's actually structured in an unusual way. Instead of setting goals, it lists 6 priorities. So we were asked to look at how these might have changed or stayed the same. So for many of you, the top priority from the cultural plan remains building bridges. People are energized by the success of the arts to connect communities, to reach new audiences and promote cooperation. You told us that you and your organizations, your boards really appreciate this and want to continue and expand it. One of the most interesting findings is a new interest in collective action among the arts community, among yourselves. Specifics that you talked about included improving arts education in the public schools, that is, working collectively to accomplish that, expanding the city's role in the arts, and even running an arts advocate for city council. Lastly, another new priority is to build on the success of existing initiatives. Examples are the Regional Museum Network, Lincoln Center Institute, and providing culturally specific program. I'm a former dancer, so I really related to hearing about the Dallas Black Dance Theater's collaboration in Wichita Falls. Since these are successful and inspiring for people, not just the arts community, but for the audience, they naturally ask, what's next? So answering this question is now possible exactly because the Alliance, yourselves, and the cultural plan have built the capacity to dream bigger and to push farther.
You know, would love to hear any thoughts, questions. And in particular, I'd ask, does this sound right to you? Is there anything that we might have incorrectly heard? Does it sound like we heard everything right? Anything that we might have missed?
I think y'all did a great job. This is what I remember our discussions being about in February. It feels a decade away, but I think this is what we discussed, at least in the meetings that I was present at. So I feel like y'all really did a good job of taking the things that were important to us in those meetings and putting them into this presentation.
Thank you.
Any other initial impressions or thoughts? Well, while you're thinking, I think David and I would share with you that, or reiterate, I should say, something I mentioned earlier, which is that, I think the changes in the work that all of you are doing, what's happened since this cultural plan was adopted in 2012 is palpable. I mean, the change in the community is palpable. And I guess we didn't really explain the concept of plateau or platform. And this was, in a sense, a question we asked to the foundation, or put forward to Pretty as they were ultimately were the client here, which is to say, all right, you've achieved all of this from the 2012 cultural plan, but the question you have to ask yourself is are we going to use this now as a platform? In other words, we've gotten to this place and this is a platform for the next direction to go to, or have we gotten to a plateau, which means we're not sure we can go much further. And in a sense, we presented that as a challenge to say, and in our thinking, it's a platform, right? It's the beginning, it's a launch of a new place. You've elevated to this place. Now, where do we go to the next? What's the next place that we go to? So that's really the concept of a plateau or a platform. And in our conversations with the Alliance board in particular, I would say it was unanimous to hear them say that they view it as a platform as well, that it's just, it's not the end, it's the beginning, so to speak, or it's the next place along the lines.
I am deeply curious to hear from my colleagues how they answer that question, plateau or platform. I will tell you that our board remains highly enthusiastic and supportive of, advancing the needle, moving the needle further. But it is also important that we recognize the environment that we're in. And we really need to hear from you guys how this plan, the accomplishments, the pieces that we need to come back and work a little harder on. Arts in schools is a big one, you know, that we did not accomplish in the ways that I had hoped, that the plan tried to emphasize. But we need to hear from you, not just what you think about David and Martin. Yeah, they're pretty good guys. But and more about where we were in 2012 and where we are in 2020 as a cultural community. So how does our work help us get stronger? How does our work help the community get stronger? Have we made any progress in your eyes now that you're listening to this this report? What are you thinking?
I thought the report reflected what we have probably individually seen, a great excitement in our community about what strides have been made and how that vibrant community has begun to manifest itself, has made great strides. This strange year, of course, has had all of us on hold and waiting to see. And I think that everyone else would probably agree with me that we can hardly wait for it to get over and for the pandemic to pass, to the extent that we can jump in once again to the activities that have been on hold, and that we can continue to find ways to cooperate and grow more and more.
Thank you. Jean, you had a thought?
Yeah, I was just going to say that the whole pandemic has exposed some priorities and shown us some places where we really need to work more. But it's also really emphasized how the progress we've made in collaboration has been helpful, because right now, like we're planning our fall concert, and we're doing new collaborations with new relationships that have been building. And honestly, this would not be at all the same experience for us trying to create this performance right now if we didn't have that collaboration and these shared resources. So I'm like doubly thankful for that right now. But also it's exposed to us that we have not made at all the progress that we needed to in the school system, because what we found is even the progress that we had made, the programs that we had going on in the public school system, as soon as there was, these challenges, they dropped us to the bottom of the priority list. And now the district is saying, yes, you can continue with these, but the principals in the campuses where we were, we're presenting them with safe plans for how we can continue, and they're just like, nope, don't even want to deal with it right now. So I think it's really shown me just how far we still need to go in getting people within the public school system to value arts programs.
So I have one small thing to share, kind of similar to what Jean spoke about, was, this year we've seen so many social justice issues come up, and I think that some of our city leaders forgot that they have some really, lots of good historians at their disposal in town, and there were issues that they could have called on us to not guide them, but to provide some insight. Like, that is what we study, that is what we do. We research the past. And I think that specifically with some of the monument issues that came up this year, I wish that they would have remembered to call on us, because we would have been happy to sort of contribute to the discussion. But I'm hoping that in the future, as these issues may come up again, that they will remember that they have some great historians, both at the university and in the nonprofits in town. So I hope that in the future, they don't forget us.
Great comment. Thank you, Madeline.
2012, we were coming out of a drought and a very depressed city, in my opinion. People they just looked at it that we weren't going to come alive. So the original culture plan, I feel like, gave us spirit, and it gave people a direction. Our organization specifically, we referred to it almost on a daily basis back then. And we had artists involved in the many discussions that had. So what has come out of 2012 and move forward, I'm with Jean in, gosh, it was exciting. We were getting some traction, and I contribute a lot of it to the platform that the Alliance gave and the direction that was out there, and just that information in the community. Where we're at right now is definitely at a halt. You know, I'm with Jean. They dropped us from close to the top of the numbers at the school to right now, math science, they're just trying to get kids in school. So we're not their priority, but I feel like we're far from a plateau. I feel I'm excited about what I've seen in Wichita Falls. The arts have become not the back seat. They're close to the front seat, and I feel like the cultural plan originally is what ignited it, and everything that you guys said to me is accurate. It just validated. It's just that we can't stop. We have to keep pushing.
Right.
I have a question more than a comment, and that question is, from that position in 2012 until now, how have the conversations around individual organizations' board tables changed? I know those of you who are fortunate enough to have staff that have been out there and been active as part of the Alliance and these conversations, but what have the conversations been like at the board table? And have they changed?
Well, Leslie, I'm going to jump on that one immediately. In the Arts Council, our board table has totally changed. We have a vibrant board that's interested. We have a vibrant executive committee. I'm very pleased, but where I've really seen, and I'm excited, is we do have, we have over 50 member organizations here, but we have some very small member organizations. And these were like Wichita Falls Poetry Society. Let's use that one for example. And 5 years ago, I would have told you it wouldn't be in existence today. And they are, and they're vibrant, and they're moving forward. We have several new organizations starting. I just see the generational change happening. It's just slow. It's a big elephant, and we're still working on it from my perspective, from our organization. It's hard. I'm learning that I have to call these individual board members and just basically have a discussion with them because everyone is busy, but they're very interested.
I've only been in town for 2 years, so that kind of colors it a little bit, but the discussions at my board have changed significantly since I came on, as they're looking at the museum with a much broader scope. So it's no longer just a heritage or history organization, it's a cultural organization. And a lot of that is because of the work we have done with the Alliance. They are sort of broadening their scope a little bit.
I want to say a couple of thanks. One, to the original group of dreamers that were given the challenge of commissioning the plan and imagining what the goals of a cultural plan could be, and then waiting patiently while the community had many conversations about its ideals. I see Paula Perkins is on this call. Certainly Leslie Schaffner was the program officer at the Pretty Foundation at the time that this conversation got kicked off, as was Patty Young, who is also now on our board. So sometimes it's those original dreamers that put their foot out in the water that we forget because they begin to stand back. But I wanted to say thank you to them as I came to Wichita Falls several times to look at the job and consider Wichita Falls as my new home. There was some heavy-handed, underhanded activity going on between Paula Perkins and Leslie Schaffner as they entertained me in beautiful ways and just kept saying, so when are you moving? And then I think there is the community of artists, the individual artists, the folks that are not connected to an organization that I met during those times, and continue to see those artists grow and continue to see you embracing how we can use our local artists in different ways to make sure that they stay in Wichita Falls and that they can achieve some decent level of livelihoods. To the boards over time that all of our organizations have had, everybody around this screen and your boards, you know, the toughest group of people to penetrate are boards of directors. They're great individual people, but when you put them together on a board, they have a whole personality that you kind of have to manage. But I think that what they see you do influences how they think about the growth of the arts community, how they see and hear you behave. And so I really appreciated the chance to work with them through you. I see Mike Davis on this call, hiding from us, who probably was one of the first people to hear my rant about where is the Black community in Wichita Falls, as he was just taking over the reins of the Martin Luther King Center. And he's been a steady and collaborative partner. A year or so ago, when the Arts Council and MSU moved to create the wonderful mural in the Martin Luther King Center. You know, those kinds of things are game changers for our communities. So just want to say that I see the depth of growth happening. It frightens me to think that we have just reached the platform. Thank you for that, Martin. But I believe that we do have a lot to do. And this year, I agree with Jean, this year has kind of shown us some of the areas of strength and some of the areas that we need to continue to work toward. So,
you know, just an observation along, oh, I'm sorry, Margie.
Well, there you go. It's on you.
Just an observation that, you know, to build on that is I think that, you know, one of the hardest things that I think we observe is we're working with our clients nationally. And I work with a number, I'm in the Philadelphia areas where I live, and I also do a lot of strategic planning and have done a lot here in this region with all kinds of groups. I'm working with a lot of theaters right now. There's a general sense that long-range strategic planning is 15 to 30 days. You know, that right now the idea of thinking about long-term plans, people are having a very difficult time wrapping their arms around it. They you know, it's all about scenarios, right? You know, the theaters I'm working with in particular, I think one example is one theater has 8 different budget scenarios for how this year is going to play out. And they're constantly changing each of them because, you know, first they were going to try and start in November and have a season. Now they're going to try in February. Well, they know that may get moved to April. And, or they may not have any seasons at all, or they're going to do some things virtually. And everything is focused on just dealing with what the moment is. But I would suggest one of the takeaways from this, when the report is, you know, shared more broadly, and there's some recommendations to the foundation. And one of those is to think about in 2 or 3 years that it'll be time to do a new cultural plan. And I think this is something where the cultural community can really, and the Alliance can really coalesce to bring the city to the table to be a partner in it, because the city can't think about that right now. They're just not going to spend they're not going to put any energy into it because they're just dealing with what is right in front of them. But, you know, I guess I would encourage and urge all of you to have that one piece of your brain that's thinking, well, 2 years from now in 2022, you know, hopefully we'll be able to get the conversation started again, that it's time to take this broader look about, okay, where have we been? Here's where we've come, and do a cultural plan at that point about where you really want to go based on everything that's been accomplished. So it's hard to do at the moment, right? Because we're all on a daily basis are just thinking about either keeping the doors open or figuring out just how to, you know, do whatever. But there will be a time to go back to think about in a longer term plan.
David?
Yeah, I would just comment a couple things. When Martin came up with the wonderful title of Plateau or Platform for this report, posing a question of, where do we go from here? And when we presented this report to the Alliance Board, the clear answer was platform. We're moving forward. We're going to build on what we've accomplished in the last 8 years, or in the case of the Alliance, just 4+ years. And that's what we're hearing from you today. Let's definitely move forward. And I know Martin has mentioned it, but I just wanted to say that outside of this report, the Pretty Foundation has asked us to make some recommendations, some comments about their role in the future. And I just wanted to say that your ability to come together, to work collaboratively, to be clearly focused on priorities for the community has not only been successful up to now in implementing the cultural plan, but I think that would be supportive of what we'll be saying to the Pretty Foundation. It'll make your position stronger as you seek funding from Pretty and probably other funders as well. And it's been great to meet you and work with you. I hope we get to do it again in the future.
Yeah, we had hoped to be able to do this presentation in person when the original plan, but obviously here we are.
Yeah.
In our little squares, our Hollywood squares.
Well, thank you, Cultural Planning Group, very much for your commitment to this project and for raising the bar for us as you sign off. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to turn it over to Anne. I guess I also would like to take the liberty of asking Leslie Schaffner, as she sits quietly in a different role than she had when we started this venture, if she has any reflections.
I want to thank Martin and David for all the work that they put in. I thoroughly enjoyed the opportunity to visit with both of you when you were in town in human form and not on a screen. And, I think I looked at the date. I was taken aback when I looked at the date of when we started this journey back in 2011. We had a great opportunity at the Pretty Foundation to benefit from Robert Pretty's generosity and take on some special initiatives. And arts and culture was one of them that we focused on originally. And David Wolfert and I looked at each other and said, we have no idea about arts and culture, but we'll figure it out. And so in the beginning, it was a little bit like the blind leading the blind. So it took us a little while to get rolling on it. And I remember when we released it, it was at Impact. And we were so excited. I was so excited. I was so nervous about releasing it because I realized it was a big deal for our community, but it was only going to be successful if our organizations got involved and bought into it. We formed an organizing board of about 4 or 5 of us. We spent a long time just trying to decide how this would go forward. And when we came to the conclusion that an organization needed to be started, it was not what the original plan was, but sometimes when things take a different tack, it turns into something beautiful. And I think one of the most difficult things that we did was to find someone to lead this new organization. And we spent literally a year looking at people from around the country that would be a right fit for our community. And I don't think I'd have anybody on the forming board that would disagree with me that probably the best decision that we made as a board was to hire Margie, because she took that plan and boy, did she run with it. And has far exceeded the expectations of the Pretty Foundation or the organizing board when we started this journey. So even though it started in 2011, it came to life in 2016 when 2 boys in a horse trailer helped Margie move into town and start the journey here. So thanks to her, and thanks to every one of you who have been a part of making this successful. It's not just one person, it's many people that made this happen and continue to make it happen. And I am so proud to see all of the change and the expansion in our community and all the dollars that are coming in from the state and for the National Endowment for the Arts. That's remarkable and a great testament to you all. And I know that's more time than you wanted to give me, Margie, but that's what happens when you let me unmute.
Oh, no. Thanks, Leslie. Anybody else that's on the phone? Sherry Armstrong, can I put you on the spot? Who else is I see other board members. Andrea?
So I'm just really excited to be a part of it and to see it all come to fruition. The arts has been something that has been, I guess, not really on the top of my family's radar. And so with me sitting on the board for the Arts Alliance, and my husband actually sits on the board for the Arts Council. So we kind of have taken a whole different perspective in our household, and we have taken that passion and put it on our children. So I'm really excited to see how the community is going to evolve, especially Miss Margie has definitely made the arts very diverse for Wichita Falls and educated us effectively through the arts on diversity in our community. So I'm very excited and happy and honored to be a part of it.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrea. Amber, you can speak for the artists. You will speak for the artists after you unmute.
I am Amber. I speak for the artists. I don't know if I have an accurate idea of what it was like in 2012 because I just thought I was like surviving in a vacuum and I didn't know there was anything going on in the arts other than what was just bouncing around in my own head. But I know that the community that we have today has been completely transformed from the community that I'm from Wichita Falls. I ran away as soon as I got out of college and thought I would never come back. So when I returned to this town, I am thrilled to report that it is not the same place that I left, and it continues to grow and evolve in ways that I didn't give this community credit for being able to make substantive changes. And so with that, there is, I mean, I would be as wild as to say a thriving and robust art scene and thriving and robust sense of being supportive of one another as artists rather than dog eat dog, only one of us can be successful and everybody else must perish. That we all just want to see each other be successful and take steps to bring each other in on as many projects as possible. And I am so glad that I'm here to get to witness it and be a part of it. And it's a direct result of this cultural plan of the city leaders saying, hey, art has value for the entire community. Let's see what we can do to create the right conditions for it to take root and grow. And getting to work with and under Margie has been the highlight of my life. And I, couldn't ask for a better mentor and leader. So that is all I have to say for the artists. Thank you for calling me out.
Excellent. Thanks again, everybody. I'll turn it over to Anne, who will sort of guide us to curtain.
Our next session will be an overview of the state of the arts with Margie Reese, looking at where we may be going next year and what we're thinking about. But I think we're all ready to take the bull by the horns, so to speak. I'm excited about 2021. And if you'd asked me in March if I felt that way, I would have said, no, 2021 will never get here. And we're almost there. So I do want to thank you all for your contribution to this assessment and for being here and being present and being a partner